Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm open to this discussion and see what happens.
Yes, yes, yes. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, I have the notes that Sarah sent over,
Uh-huh.
and specifically, we can coordinate three 20 to 30-minute videos to reach a broader audience. So what I envision is I would interview you just like we're here on Zoom, and we would have three segments. And the first segment would focus on how CS holds discipline and profession of nursing to care holistically for patients and families. So that would be one segment. The other segment, how healthcare leaders leverage CS to guide them, their relationships, and their organizations. That would be another one. And then the third one, I'm thinking, is focused specifically on how do we take the body of your work and truly embed it throughout culture, throughout companies and organizations. What does that look like? So, what I would need for you from you to really honor everything are questions. What are some of the questions you want to make sure I ask you in each of those segments? And I'll send you an email on this because I believe how you're wired. Keep me honest. I'll ask you a question and you will just get in a stream of consciousness and go for it. And that's fine. And the only thing that I would ask is in each of the sessions, if we can kind of maybe keep the responses to maybe about a minute or two so that we can chop it up and get more out of it, right?
Okay.
How does that feel to you so far? Does that resonate?
That sounds good. The only thing I'm just wondering if that's 30 minutes is too long. I'm thinking that the segments might be more like 15 minutes or
You
20. I
you
think
read my mind.
30,
15
yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
15 minutes is fine. Yep, 15 minutes is
I
fine.
don't think we keep people's attention for 30 minutes anymore.
Okay. All right. 15 minutes is fine. So that's what I'm thinking. And then what I'll do, I'll record via Zoom and then take all of the raw footage and give that to Sarah and Julie. And you can edit it however you want to edit it. But I think what will happen, even in 15 minutes, you and I will kind of get into a dialogue and I may hear you say something and I'll say, Dr. Watson, tell me more. Can you just share a little bit more about that? Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So the next thing, I'll send a follow-up email, and then we can look at your calendar over the next 30 days. Would you like to do the 3 15-minute segments in one setting? Would that be easier?
I think it's easier for me. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, perfect. We'll do that. Okay, all
Have a
righty.
little break or transition, but yeah, I think that's better.
Okay, what else? How else can I best serve you during this
Oh, you're
time?
so kind. You're so kind. Should we start with the first one or do a dry run or do you want to?
Sure,
I
sure.
mean,
I don't have questions, but sure, if
well,
you want.
I've got answers.
Okay, this is great. This is great. Let me just, since we're just rolling, let me just get a little light turned on. And yeah, there we go.
I'll turn on some light as well. Maybe that'll help my side. I don't know.
And just so that I'm clear, would you like me to introduce you as Dr. Jean Watson, founder of Watson Caring Science Institute?
Yes, that sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay. Already great. All right, here goes.
All right.
Hi, folks. I am Simon T. Bailey, and today I am so honored to introduce you to Dr. Jean Watson, who is the founder of the Watson Caring Science Institute. And we are going to get into a dialogue that I really believe you are going to benefit from and really enjoy. So, Dr. Watson, how are you?
I'm wonderful, and it's lovely to have this time with you, Simon.
So glad that you have made yourself available. Here's the question for you. When we think of caring science, the caring science journey, how does caring science hold the discipline profession of nursing to care holistically for patients and families? How would you answer that?
Well, this has evolved over time, but you know, the roots of nursing are back to Nightingale, and she already was a mystic and a scientist and a scholar and a visionary and a healer at many levels. And so somewhere along the way, nursing got detoured from its fullness of its own development as its own unique profession. And in the last 30 to 40 years, we have begun to really reclaim the foundation of nursing and its relationship to humanity. And my work started, my first book was written back in 1979 after getting my PhD, because I was realizing that our science model, the Western model of science that nursing was adopting in academics and in clinical setting, was one of really Western science of separation that distanced us, that gave us to a clinical perspective and a professionalization that distanced us from our humanity and from the patients. And so, and it was also lacking in a meaningful philosophical foundation. So the origins of my work came from those grassroots of realizing that nursing had something to offer to humanity that transcended the system, transcended diagnosis and treatment, even transcended age or setting, which is really about our humanity. It comes from nursing, but it's really for humanity. And because of that, I have continually evolved to where I have developed what it's referred to now as the universals of human caring. These are 10 Keratos processes that have informed the development of my work. However, these Keratos processes are located within a new model of science. There's a new philosophy of science that informs caring and our humanity. And it has to do with what I'm now framing as caring science or unitary caring science, because it captures the unity of our humanity. It captures this quantum universe that we're in, and we are required to advance and evolve in our humanity, in our consciousness, to realize that I'm connected with you, you're connected with me, what I'm doing to myself, I'm doing to others. And so it really is a pause, a reflection. It's a philosophical value grounding that requires personal as well as professional development in order to move from doing and separating and just busy task to actually being. What does it mean to be a nurse? What does it mean to be present? What does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to pause, to listen authentically to that other person's story, to hold sacred space where they can hear themselves even when we're so busy? So these concrete micro practices are informed by an evolved model of science. It allows for the metaphysics as well as the concrete physical realities. It brings in the spiritual. It honors our own spirit and our own emotions, our subjective world, not just the objective. Mm-hmm. And it brings meaning and helps us transcend the despair. You know, there's this quote from Viktor Frankl. He says the roots of despair are the lack of meaning in our lives. And so the search for meaning and purpose, even in the midst of suffering, these transcend all of our humanity across the globe. And caring science and the 10 Keratos processes are one entree into how do we cope, how do we find meaning, how do we evolve in our consciousness of humanity, how do we reach out and realize that we're touching, and we never know how we're touching the life of another human being. And when we're touching them, they are touching us. So all of this is part of the evolution of nursing, but it's also the evolution of a broader model of science that transcends medical clinical science.
Wow. Dr. Watson, what prevents systems from embracing caring science and this research that you have focused on for the last 40 plus years? What prohibits systems from really evolving and moving forward?
Consciousness, consciousness, consciousness. Unless the leaders have a vision, a value system that's able to live out at a higher level of consciousness that holds our humanity and the importance of the human aspects in the system, we are back into this control, these scripts, these artificial impositions that try to get people to conform to some kind of category or some kind of intervention that is there to serve the system rather than the people in it. So therefore, you have this really disconnection between the heart of our humanity and the heart of a profession, of the heart of a health professional who is there to offer this healing and helping other persons to find meaning, to be in right relation, to discover how they are able to cope even in the midst of pain and suffering, and come up with a new reconciliation of being in the world. All of this is very different dynamic, and yet the systems are constructed around a very hard-edged science model of objectivity and control and outcomes that are designed to serve the administrators rather than the people in the system. And now we're all waking up. The pandemic has awakened us to this reality that we cannot survive as humans or as a planet. And we certainly cannot survive as healthcare systems the way they have been constructed. Nurses are leaving. They're leaving the profession. And one of the reasons they're leaving the profession is because this buildup of the oppression of the institutional controls over the heart of the human caring that nurses are brought to bear, the reason they're there, that dissonance is no longer being tolerated. And so nurses are either leaving, or the ones that are staying are more determined than ever to give voice and language and informed action to help transform the system and the self from inside out. And that's what my work is about. Is really devotion. I've been devoted to really advancing nursing in its fullness as a caring, healing, and health profession, not just a technical, skill-driven, robotic practice model that the systems have tried to impose upon the professional.
One of the things you talk about in your work, and there are leaders that are listening to us right now, you talk about the power of being, belonging, and becoming.
Yes.
What would you say to leaders listening to us right now who are wanting to embrace this approach to being, becoming, belonging? How do they start?
They start with self. The self of the leader has to undergo a transformation because they have to discover their own power and their own strength and their own authenticity and who they are. And from that place, they also need to cultivate a higher consciousness and language of this phenomenon of our humanity. One of the reasons we are having such a gap is that we have not had a language of the phenomenon of human caring. How do we look at outcomes when you don't even have a language? And in this postmodern era, if you don't have a language of a phenomenon of human caring and healing and health and wholeness for humanity, well, we're just going to succumb to the traditional mindset of just controlling people, and also really reducing people to the moral status of objects. Do you know what we have created in our dominant system is we've taken a whole human being, in the first instance, they're patient, and then the patient gets reduced to body physical. And then body physical gets reduced to machines and technology, as well as the controls in the system. And when that happens, we've taken a whole human being and we have reduced them down to the moral status of an object. And that's very dangerous, because as soon as you reduce another to the moral status of object, you can justify doing something to others' object you would never do to a fully functioning person like yourself. So that brings us to this deeper ethic, the ethic of being human, of being in right relation with self and other. In those moments, I talk about transpersonal moments. These moments transcend time, space, and physicality. All we have are moments, and our ways of being in those moments allow for something new to happen, particularly when we're able to hold that moment and have that spirit-to-spirit connection and really authentically hear that other person and see that other person. Every person in the world needs to be seen. Every person in the world needs to be heard. Every person in the world needs to know that they matter and what they have to say matters, and that they have love. And carrying my work at Keratos, I've used the word Keratos because I use it intentionally, the Latin word to bring love, back into our life and back into our world and back into our practices. So this Keratos is a way of being, and the consciousness, Keratos consciousness, we hold that in our hearts in these caring moments. We pause and we're authentically present. Something new can happen in that moment. Little miracles begin to happen. So that is the being of the person. And then the beginning and the being and the evolving of becoming more fully human, becoming more alive, more light, bringing more light into the humanity. And when we have these higher vibration feelings of compassion, of caring, of love, of forgiveness, of grace and beauty, I mean, these are really higher vibration feelings that come from our heart, of our humanity. When you have that consciousness, you're changing the vibrational field of everybody around you. So you're literally, as a human with this consciousness, you are repatterning the field of that dominant biocytic institution by your presence, by your humanity. And when that radiates out to the whole, you have this ethic of belonging. The ethic of belonging, I use the work of the French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, and he informs my work in Caring Science, because he says the ethic of belonging is the first principle of science. See, the ethic of separation, or the value or the neutrality of the separation, is the foundation of Western science. But when you move up to a higher vibration, allowing science to evolve to a higher level, the ethic of belonging, but it's the belonging to this infinite field of universal cosmic love. We all come from love, we all return to love, and it's that sacred circle of life and death to which we all belong. And so this is an awakening for our humanity right now. It's a crisis and a crossroads. We cannot survive as humans or the planet in the dominant paradigm that's imposed upon us today, and we see that. We're all experiencing it, but we don't necessarily have the insight or the vision or the framework to which we can hold something greater that becomes this cosmology of love instead of the cosmology of hate and anger and fear that we've been operating under.
Wow. So for someone listening to us right now, do you have any examples of systems that have embraced the Keratos processes and they are getting transformational, or as you would say, that transpersonal result? Any healthcare systems that really get this at the core that you could share?
Yes. Yes. I'll just say as a beginning for any of the systems that I'll give examples from, this work provides a full circle of knowledge. It links the values and the mission of the organization with a deep philosophy and an ethic, a theory, the language of the processes of the phenomena, into concrete micro and macro practices, as well as outcomes. So the hospitals that are affiliates of Watson Caring Science Institute that are really systematically delving deeper, authentically into this work and transforming self and system inside out are examples like Stanford Healthcare, Kaiser Permanente, Northern California, Cedar Sinai in Los Angeles, St. John Providence in Detroit, Michigan. We now have a new set of affiliates in the Veteran Administration hospitals. Just yesterday, I met with 17 leaders of the South Central VA VISN, which is called the Original Vision VA system, where they are now an affiliate, systematically creating very concrete programs where nurses are actually using the language of the Keratos processes. They are sharing their caring moments and documenting caring moments. They are using aesthetics and art and other ways of knowing, not just empirical knowing, to reveal these phenomena, these expressive phenomena of the heart of nursing and the beauty of our practices. They are engaged in helping each other with very micro practices before they enter the patient's room to pause, to walk more slowly, to fall into their heart center and radiate compassion for themselves before they enter that room for the patient. You talk about holistic care. You seek to see under this consciousness, who is that spirit-filled person behind the disease, behind the diagnosis, behind the patient who, like, please see me, please see me, please hear me. Don't just treat me like a patient. I'm a human being here with all of this trauma and distress and fear and anxiety. And the nurse holds that higher vibration consciousness. She or he can literally repattern the field in their presence in those moments. And it opens up space where the patient can be heard and they can actually find new meaning. And so this becomes a practice of healing, the way in which the nurse touches someone, not just physically, but even non-physically, their presence touches. So there's a whole range of practices that nurses are engaged in to really live this out and show outcomes. So we now have national research on 5 of the Keratos processes, and I'll just share what these items are because they're quite fascinating. It's quite revolutionary. We're asking patients, because it's consistent with the theory and the philosophy and the values, was your care delivered with loving kindness? It's the first Keratos process for self and others. Did you have a trusting relationship with your practitioner? Were your basic needs met with dignity? Did you experience a healing environment? And were your values and beliefs honored? So we have been now working with Press Ganey and some other major companies that are looking at outcomes in hospitals, realizing that this is the only measure hospitals have of the authentic patient's experience of caring. So it's very important now to keep this momentum going and participate in the full circle of knowledge for outcomes, because otherwise the outcome research in hospitals has been, the food and, the whole room and the climate and all that sort of thing. But we're finding that these variables become really statistically significantly important in terms of the patient's experience of caring. And in one of the studies, we actually had a hospital with a significant number, not statistically significant, but significant number of patients who said they never had a caring experience or a loving kindness experience.
Wow.
By anybody. And now that wakes us up. You have to really pay attention to that broader system and those institutional controls, or what are they doing? And now we have hospitals that are affiliates with us where they're actually using, we have a measure of those same variables for the culture. And one of them is the healing environment. And now hospitals are starting to use the healing environment to put pressure back on the administrators, because they have a responsibility to create a caring healing environment if we're a healthcare system for the practitioners as well as for the patients. So this too is like upside down. And this new awakening and another evolved consciousness, nurse leaders are starting to critique these old paradigms such as nurse retention and just kind of keep nurses as objects in this industrial product line system that we've created. We have to interrupt that and repattern and create a whole new, entirely new approaches. And nurses know how to do this.
Wow.
Nurses are leaders in this whole transformation.
So good. Last question for you. Someone listening to us right now, they want to follow your work. Where should they go online to follow your work? And for those leaders that are saying, we need this in our system and in our organization, where should they go?
Thank you, Simon. You can go to watsoncarengscience.org, or you can reach out to me directly. I'm pretty good at responding to emails, people tell me. Jean, Jean, at watsoncarengscience.org. So it'd be my pleasure to provide more information, and we will have new information on this affiliate program, as well as other programs that we have multiple options for people to really go deeper into this work, personally and professionally.
Dr. Jean Watson, thank you so much. We can't wait to hear more. Thank you.
Bless you. Thank you so much, Simon. We'll stay in touch.
For sure. All right, so we'll stop there and we'll keep rolling. This feels good. You feel good?
Yeah, I'm let's just keep going. That's
a good dry run. I think we keep it. It was so good.
All right.
Here's the second thing I want to get into: how healthcare leaders leverage the Keratos processes and leverage caring science to guide them, their relationships and their organizations. And something that I would love for us to kind of do in the second segment, when you answer that, is talk a little bit more about the 10 processes, right? But with the micro practice. Like, so what is the go do? I hear it, but what's the go do? Okay.
Very good. Okay, good.
All right.
Now we're still recording.
Yeah, still recording, still recording. And the beauty of this, we just, when they edit it, they'll splice it all together. So, hi, I'm Simon T. Bailey, and I am so deeply honored to interview Dr. Jean Watson. Dr. Jean Watson is the founder of the Watson Caring Science Institute. And today we are going to get into a specific question that I believe you want to listen to the answer that she's going to give us. And here's the question, Dr. Watson. How can caring science specifically help healthcare leaders leverage their systems, think in a fresh way by using caring science that impacts their relationships and their organizations?
Thank you for that wonderful question, because this is a really turning point for healthcare right now. So the need to shift to a different model of science becomes one of the first steps of this, where we have an evolved consciousness that we are all connected, that we can no longer keep this distancing and separation model of the objective empirical focus alone in our healthcare. We have to include the humans. And with that includes the consciousness of caring science, and caring science within it. There are actually the phenomena of human caring, of giving language and voice. Again, if you don't have your own language, you don't exist. So there's no phenomenon, there's no description or naming of the phenomenon of human caring until I've come up with these simple things. And it's nothing profound. We all know this, but they're invisible, they're ad hoc, and we don't systematically attend to them in terms of our personal life, nor as well as our professional. So the very first Keratos process has to do with our values, and how do we sustain these values that call us into responding to health and healing and caring for humanity, whether you're in business or whether you're in healthcare. But the values can only be lived out through our own personal practice. And the first Keratos process is the personal practice of loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity for yourself. Because we are hard on ourselves as humans. If we stop and listen to the scripts that we give ourselves all the time, we're very judgmental, very, very blaming, we're very hard on ourselves. So having compassion and gentleness and love for ourselves, and the practice of that compassion, if we don't have it for ourselves, then we're judging and we're blaming others. So that's one of the reasons we have all this distress in the world and violence, is because we don't have evidence of our own practice. Something's happened along the way to destroy somebody's heart and their loving kindness to themselves. And so therefore their hate, it brings out hate and violence for others. So the first practice is that personal practice. And then when you have that as your way of being, that allows you to have a different consciousness, a different patience, allowing for compassion and listening to another person's story, hearing them and seeing them, rather than judging and blaming and fighting and distancing. So that is the very first Keratos process. The next one has to do with the authenticity of our presence. Our human presence. I mean, we are so beautiful. We forget how beautiful we are as humans. And just being able to honor ourselves and see the beauty in other people. The ethics of face comes in here as part of the caring science framework. Again, Emmanuel Levinas, he says, we cannot sustain our humanity at this point in human history unless we have a face-to-face connection. And he goes on to say, when you look into the face of another human being, you're looking into the mystery of it and the miracle of the human soul, the infinity of the human soul of the other, and it mirrors the infinity of your own soul. And again, if you don't have that face-to-face connection, with that understanding of our connections, this belonging, then we actually can reduce another person down to a way that destroys their soul, so to speak. So the second Keratos process has to do with the authenticity of our presence and how we, in our presence, are able to enable the faith and hope and give new meaning for that person, helping them to find meaning in that situation, whether it's conflict or whether it's joy, but helping that person to elevate and find the faith and hope to sustain them. The third one has to do with being our own self-development. It's like being sensitive to ourselves enough and reflective. It's a reflective practice model. Being reflective and sensitive enough to ourselves and how we handle conflict, or how we handle anger, or how we handle hurt, whether we lash out or we react, or whether we're able to accept it with equanimity and not try to destroy ourselves through this, where we actually are loving ourselves and having a new level of reflection so that we can actually be authentically present to another person. The fourth one has to do with actually developing and sustaining those trusting, caring relationships. Within this framework of caring science, everything is done within the context of relationship, and particularly for administrators to realize, or leaders, that the concept of relational accountability is a lovely idea. We're accountable, but we're accountable to the system, to the demands, to the task. But what about caring relational accountability? That's about the sustaining our caring, healing relationships, is the fourth Keratos process. And I'm elaborating them because they're more condensed, in terms of the literature. But the fifth one is one of the most significant ones that most people love. I had a physician call me a while ago, and he was telling me one of the nurses introduced him to the Keratos process, and he said, "This changed my life and my practice." And he told me the two that were so significant to him. He said number 5 and number 8. He's naming the Keratos process. So number 5 has to do with authentically listening to another person's story. And that, again, is like holding that sacred space, being able to authentically listen, not try to fix something, but everybody needs to be heard. And when you hear another person's story, we realize it could be our story. Anyone else's story could be our story. So it humbles us and brings a sense of reverence to that relationship in that moment. It keeps us in that unknowing space to honor this, and really realizing that it connects us with the great sea of humanity and hearing another person's story. So, and allowing for the positive and the negative expression. It's just as important, because there's research that shows this is actually healing for the person when they can express their positive and negative feelings. So the sixth one has to do with what traditionally was known as problem solving in nursing. We have all these problem solvings, assessment, evaluation, and intervention and outcomes, etc., in a very linear model. But in the Keratos processes, we have obviously acknowledged some issues and problems, but we reframe them to find people's strengths, and we look for creative solutions. And nursing is all about finding creative solutions with patients, and we see this daily in practices. And the seventh one has to do with, I forgot myself. It has to do with education, because we're always involved in teaching and learning. But in this model, we really work from the other person's frame of reference rather than our frame of reference. And we seek to hear the meaning that they have for the condition. We now know that beyond the diagnosis and beyond the terminology that we use for treatment or even caring, it's the meaning the person attaches to it that becomes the influence in the patients, the way they respond to this. So the education and their meaning of this, and learning to understand that information is not knowledge. And we give a lot of information. Information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not necessarily understanding. And understanding is not necessarily integrating it into your personal life to change your life or to use it, which would lead to wisdom in the fullest sense of the word. So all of this trajectory of a consciousness beyond just giving people information as part of the teaching and learning. And the eighth Keratos process has to do with creating a healing environment. And this is one that's, we become the environment. We can be in the physical environment. We can help that person reframe or repattern that environment through our presence, through our ways of introducing caring healing modalities of touch, of tenderness, of robotherapy, or energetic modalities of healing touch, music, sound, aesthetics, etc. Those are all considered caring healing energetic modalities under this framework. But in the end, when it's all said and done, we can have the most beautiful environment. But in the end, the nurse or the human is the environment. We can have a beautiful environment, but you have toxic people in the environment and those institutional controls, it's not healthy. So that too is part of the transformation of creating a healing environment. And the ninth Keratos process has to do with this authentically assisting with another person's basic needs, or just holding that person and realizing the vulnerability, but also the dignity that's required. And it's really a sacred act. And that's where caring science becomes sacred science in the biggest level, this evolution of this work. And the 10th Keratos process has to do with being open. We don't have all the Western science and all the technology does not offer us answers to all these spiritual and existential, mysterious unknowns about life and death and our human experiences that we are suffering and experiencing. So that too is being open to hold space for something new to happen and to find a different direction. So those are the 10 Keratos processes, and each one of those invites or points toward the creativity of the individuals, but also some patterns for how to have a micro practice with each one of these. Now, some of the things that are happening in the hospitals that are doing this work, they take one Keratos process a month and they work on this collectively at the unit level or the system level to explore, what does this mean to me personally? What does this mean to me professionally? What does this mean to our culture? What does it mean to the patient care that we're offering? So it's really helping to transform self and system intellectually and experientially. So you're not just fixing up the system. You're not just changing the rules and the patterns of the strategies that most of these hospital administrators come in with, these new attempts to regulate people rather than to authentically create a different culture of caring and healing and health.
Dr. Watson, here's our last question. Are the 10 Keratos processes that you've outlined, are they transferable to other industries, other environments, Wall Street, financial, hospitality, retail? Can leaders listening to us right now transfer them? And if so, how?
Well, by learning about them, by also learning about the model of science that holds them and evolving in our consciousness, because we're still all trapped in a Western model of science. But when you move into caring science holds these 10 Keratos processes and invites people into another culture within their organization to deal with the humans and the humanity and the creativity and the new solutions that they can forth, all the imagination and the unknowns that they can cultivate by stimulating the spirit of the people and the education of the people, so that you have a shared consciousness in your culture, in your organization. And this is so important beyond nursing, but nursing, just as, most people now are understanding and operating under a mindset of Western science, but the future is going to be an evolved model of science. We see this happening all over the globe. I mean, I feel like there's a revolution in nursing around the world, because I was in as many as 18 countries one year, where I'm being invited because nurses are hungry. And it's not just nurses, the humanity is waking up to this higher need for our preserving humanity in the planet Earth. We cannot survive the way we have been operating. So organizations can be much more successful when they have this value system that's lived out through a philosophy, through an ethic, through concrete practices. And when they give voice and language to it, a vision that invites people into shared activities and projects that unite and inspire everyone.
Where can people find out more information and follow you and follow up with you?
watsoncarringscience.org, and Jean at watsoncarringscience.org. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, Simon. I'm an
Dr. Watson.
admirer of yours and your leadership.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, everyone, you've heard Dr. Jean Watson. Please go and follow her immediately and begin to think about how you might incorporate some of the learnings into your system today. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Namaste.
Okay. All right. Final segment. How you feeling? You like the flow?
Yeah, I'm getting a little, I don't know if I'm getting a little redundant, but.
No, you're absolutely fine. You're absolutely fine. One of the things that I would love for us to accomplish in this last segment of 15 minutes, and I think it's so critical, take us back to your journey of how did you start this? Why has this been your life's work? All right, so that would be the first question. And then the second question, based on where the world is right now, why caring science? Why caring science right now? Because I think people will want to know that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Is there another question you want me to ask you, or you like those two? You like those two? Okay.
Do you want me to do another intro?
Yeah, I'll do another intro. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Simon T. Bailey, and I have to admit, I am a student of Dr. Jean Watson, who's the founder of Watson Caring Science Institute. Dr. Watson, how are you?
I'm lovely, and I'm even better now that you're here.
Oh, thank you so much. How did you get involved with this whole field of caring science, which is your life's work? It's a calling. Can you give us a little of the backstory?
Yes. Well, when I entered nursing, I realized that it was perceived to be very demeaning, and it was not something that was really highly valued. And I was so disappointed that even in my education, I was oriented toward tasks and skills and procedures and medical diagnosis, etc., in contrast to the humans that I was involved in taking care of, and which I loved and I cherished and learned so much from the patients. And yet there was nothing in my education that really advanced that. And so as I continued to have my own educational development in psych nursing and in nursing in my PhD in philosophy, I began to have language to capture something I already knew. When I was exposed to the first time I got exposed to the word phenomenology, I thought I had died and gone to heaven because it gave me a language for a phenomenon that I already knew. And so it's that kind of awakening of finding language to give voice and language and informed action to something that is core to our humanity. So my very first book was written as I was there at the University of Colorado as a new faculty, witnessing the evolution of nursing under medical science, asking questions. Why are we here in an academic health science center if we don't have our own model of science with a meaningful philosophical, ethical foundation, which medicine science did not offer? So that was the origin and the motivation for my first book, because I was considering leaving nursing. But when I got started in writing this book to give voice to what I was trying to explain, and when even with their faculty, I realized I was asking myself new questions. Is there anything core to nursing that transcends time and space and setting and ages? Is there anything essentially core that is what we're about in terms of our humanity? And that's where I came up at that time with 10 curative factors that I thought were transcendent of all these medical issues. It has had to do with human-to-human caring connection. And from that, as my work evolved, I had my own journey where I lost an eye and had to do my own healing journey. So from that, I kind of got a new awakening. And I transposed those curative factors to the 10 Keratos processes bringing love back into our life and our world, using the word Keratos very intentionally to, from the Latin origin of Keratos, to really give a deeper meaning of caring. It's not just a superficial little nice way of being, but it gives a very ethical, philosophical, value foundation for what this phenomenon of human caring is about. So that's how I came with the 10 Keratos processes. And then as I have evolved, and realizing those Keratos processes didn't fit the Western model of science. They informed it, but they're ad hoc to Western science, because Western science deals with a separatist worldview. It deals with empirics. It doesn't deal with the fullness of our humanity. It doesn't allow for expanded methodologies of phenomenology and the phenomena of our humanity and all the vicissitudes of our human existence. And it doesn't allow for the fullness of our practice. It reduces our practice down to techniques and skills. So from that evolution of my consciousness, I moved to understanding a different model of science, which is this unitary caring science. And of course, the worldview shifts have accentuated this and affirmed that we're in a quantum universe. Everything is connected to everything else. So that's where I'm giving voice and language. And I've studied with the works of Emmanuel Levinas through some colleagues at Oxford University and Cambridge and so forth that help me understand his work, because it's in French. But the two concepts that are most effective for the caring science that informs it are the ethic of face, that we cannot sustain our humanity until we have a face-to-face connection, and the ethic of belonging, that we all belong to this infinite field of universal love, the cosmic love that holds everything in the universe together and represents the sacred circle of life and death, in mystery and unknowns, and all those vicissitudes of our humanity as we evolve. And when we have these practices of compassion in our heart center and move from our heart up to this higher vibration, we access, what Teilhard Chardin talks about, the omega point. You get closer to God consciousness, you get closer to universal love. So if we can cultivate those micro practices of heart-centered love that radiates out into this infinite field of universal love, then we wake up and we realize that we're all connected. So then we have to be really careful at how we're present to ourselves and each other, how we practice forgiveness, how we practice loving kindness, how we practice equanimity, non-judgmental, allowing for something new to happen in the midst of our existence, in the midst of our evolution of humanity. And this radiates out. It starts with self-caring, radiates out to the universe. Certainly eco-caring is a big issue right now. So it's a broader model of understanding. It's a cosmology of love. It brings in metaphysics and science together. And it's a new awakening for humanity is what we're embarking on at this time. We're invited into.
Wow. Dr. Watson, there is so much happening in the world right now. I won't go through the litany and list out for you, but you are well aware of some of the challenges on our planet right now. How does caring science enter into the conversation? And the second part of the question, something that you talk about a lot, is the need of the feminine energy to really begin to impact the planet. So I would love for you just to expound and share.
Thank you for that. Well, yes. In one of my books, I actually use the metaphor and imagery of the archetypes of the archetype of healing as an architect, as a archetype, and as a change agent for the architectural system. I'm not saying this very well. Ignore that.
It's okay. You can start over.
The feminine energy is needed to balance and complement the masculine energy. It's like the yin and the yang. All of us have yang energy as women, and all men have some yin energy, but we are out of balance. Our systems are out of balance. And you know, this is interesting, that no human being can heal with yang energy alone. That's powerful to think about.
Wow.
So if you don't have caring and healing and nurturing and love, you might be cured, but you're not going to be healed. And it relates to both person as well as relationships. So this too is part of the rebalancing of the field, because one of the reasons that we have so many problems in society right now is because we've had this dominant masculine, I don't mean men, but that heavy dominant energy of control, of domination, of fear, of ego, of control, of greed. All of that is dominating our worldview right now at all levels. And now how can, in war and violence is perpetuated with this world of wanting to make everything in mine through this very fear and ego control. When you move into the feminine energy, you move into the heart. And you know, it's just an interesting metaphor. I was just reading recently about even in a meditation place that you might be in, just letting your mind go up into your head to relax you as a meditation, but feel the structure of your skull is the heart. You know, moving into the head is kind of a heart, even though you're vibrating a higher energy, you still have the skull. But when you drop into your heart and just really visualize your heart, the softness of the membrane of the heart, the tenderness and the gentleness that you have to pay attention to, in contrast to being in your head, is really an imagery to remind us of the feminine and the heart and the head are metaphors.
Wow.
For the domination, the ego, the control, versus love, peace, caring, forgiveness. The very source of our humanity is in our heart. So the future has got to be heart-centered humans, not head-centered humans. And that's true for leaders, that's true for healthcare, that's for healing, that's for survival of our planet, for survival of the awakening of the shared humanity and the shared planet Earth.
So good. Dr. Watson, how can people follow you and find out more about you?
WatsonCaringScience.org. We're a nonprofit organization, and we're here to serve humanity and organizations as well as healthcare systems in particular, and nurses in particular. And anyone can reach me personally at Jean, Jean, at WatsonCaringScience.org.
Awesome. Dr. Watson, thank you so much for being with us today. Everyone go and follow her. Log on to Watson Caring Science. You will find so many tips, tools, and techniques that can really help you transform your system wherever you are right now today. Thank you so much, Dr. Watson.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, Simon.
All right, I will stop